All right, what's up? Welcome. Today we're going to be talking about a topic that I know quite a bit about. I did choose to pursue this topic at a graduate level. And so this is why I got interested in the connection between intelligence agencies and the entertainment industry, was precisely because when I first came across this idea in the early 2000s, I kind of thought it sounded crazy. I'd never heard of this. I was a movie buff. I loved movies and always enjoyed spy movies. I thought they were one of the cooler of the genres of Hollywood movies. And then I remembered as I was reading a lot of espionage stuff, reading a lot of what we might call conspiracy theories, I noticed that a lot of times you would see things that were real operations in the spy world, be like, oh, that sounds like that one movie. Well, this is kind of like that other movie. And, making connections in your head, noticing patterns as normal human beings do, which I guess you're not supposed to do that anymore. It's not normal to do that. You're a bad person if you do that. I started realizing that, well, there's a lot of reality and fiction going on at the same time, right, when it comes to movies. And then I remember the first time I ever encountered this idea was probably when you first hear stories of like the connections between Marilyn Monroe and JFK. Because you start wondering, well, here's this Hollywood starlet, and she has this ignominious death. She seems to be connected to mafia people and not just JFK and RFK, but intelligence people via RFK, JFK, and via the mob. People like, I believe she for a while dated Sam Giancana Momo. So you start to wonder, well, maybe there's more going on here. And then some years ago, there was a book that came out. Let's talk about that first. One of the first books that came out treating of this topic in the academic world. So notice I'm not talking about people writing conspiracy stuff. I'm talking about what's considered normative academia. Was this book Operation Hollywood? And this book came out because right after the benign event, this book was published in 2004, people started noticing quite a bit of connection between Pentagon offices, agencies, proposals put forth by the Pentagon to various studios. So academics began digging into this. They were interested in propaganda at that time, right, in the post-Big Nine event world. And so you got this treatment by a scholar, I don't know which university Robb is out of, but David Robb is writing for one of the mainline academic publishers. It's Prometheus Publishing, but that's connected to the whole academic world, right? Because if you don't know, like in publishing, there's pop publishing, and then there's usually another domain that's a publisher from a university, right? University of Texas or Notre Dame, right? Academic publishing is kind of its own world apart from pop publishing. So usually you'll find these types of books or people writing and publishing through universities or university-connected presses. And the book notes that the U.S. military itself kind of operates like a corporation. And it talks about going back to the days of Bernays, when Edward Bernays. Now, that's just the introductory part of the book. The book itself is about all of the different scripts and censoring that occurred throughout the 80s and 90s to various scripts. So, for example, Independence Day, movies that related to operations of clear and present danger, Jack Ryan, those kinds of stories, right? The Pentagon, the CIA, the different agencies had quite a bit of involvement in those types of scripts. And you can see why there's movies like TV shows like JAG, which I think was a popular CBS show. A lot of military and CIA spy type movies that you would expect, but sometimes it's movies that you wouldn't expect, like Independence Day, having Pentagon consultation. And what you realize is that, well, is there more to this, right? Because he talks about how, for example, the Jessica Lynch story which was a famous piece of propaganda for women in the military, that it wasn't too long after this that you got Saving Private Lynch and you got G.I. Jane, right, with Demi Moore. All of that was propaganda for promoting the idea of women at a greater numbers in the military and women on the front lines. And all of that was drawn up and strategized by, in those cases, Pentagon military-connected individuals. But it's not just the Navy and the Army and the Air Force, right? You can think back to movies in the 80s like, what was it, Iron, the one with Lou Gossett Jr., those are Air Force movies, right? They promote the Air Force in the 1980s. You guys know what I'm talking about. I never actually watched these. I always thought they were really stupid. But there's quite a bit of these. Like there was a bunch of Navy SEALs with Charlie Sheen, Top Gun. These were kind of Pentagon aided and promoted. I'm not saying the Pentagon made them. They hire directors, but they will insert messages, insert propaganda into the films. And this was very popular in the 1980s and 90s. This book covers that quite a bit because, again, this was written in 2004. So this is one of the earlier academic texts treating this topic, showing, yes, Black Hawk Down. Now, as we get up into the 2000, Iron Eagle, thank you, Red Brandon. Yeah, Iron Eagle with Lou Gossett Jr. Those are like Air Force promoting movies. So, and this is well known and well documented, right? That in the 80s and 90s we had a lot of this, especially in the Reagan era, pushing this stuff through movies. Now, as we get into the 2000s, it doesn't change, except that it seems to be more and more focused towards intelligence stuff. So, whereas in the 80s and 90s it was a lot of, military, yeah, exactly, the submarine movies. There's like, late 80s, early 90s. There's like 5, 6, 7, super submarine movies. Remember all those? You got Sean Connery, you got Wesley Pipes, you got, I can't even keep up with all the submarine movies. But that was all, yeah, Red October, thank you so much. Yeah. All those movies were also part of this phenomena. In the 2000s, though, it seems to shift, and some of the people involved in writing on this have noted that there was a shift in moving away from straight-up military. I mean, there's still military propaganda. Katy Perry makes military propaganda videos, for those who don't know. So there was some dude talking crap on Twitter saying that this doesn't exist. It's crazy to think that Taylor Swift would be connected to or involved in some sort of political or even psychological warfare promotion operation. That is not crazy. In fact, it is absolutely rational. It makes a lot of sense. It's not absolutely proven, but it doesn't matter because we're going to start today's talk by going back to the history, the beginnings. And I just mentioned one book that's the beginning of the academic treatments of this topic that I'm aware of. You can probably find articles and essays written prior to that. In fact, I've got one of the texts. So people don't know how this works in academia, right? They haven't been in academia. They don't understand that academic dorks will pick certain things and they'll study it and go down a rabbit hole. And a lot of people think that academia is useless, it's worthless, it doesn't produce anything. Nowadays, that's pretty much true. But it's not actually the case that academia doesn't help us or doesn't produce anything. The problem with academia is not that it doesn't discover things or accurately sometimes study rabbit holes. The problem with academia is that it doesn't allow you or permit making bigger connections. So, for example, you can have 10 academics that spend a lot of time and effort researching the history of Hollywood and intelligence, but you're just never allowed to connect that to anything bigger, right? It has nothing to do with anything going on today. So maybe you can talk about Coco Chanel being a spy, and you can write your dissertation on that. Or you can talk about Ian Fleming and the whole Cold War era operations of James Bond. But it doesn't matter today. You see, you can't, if you were to extrapolate that to propaganda today, oh, that's conspiracy theory, you see. So it's weird because academics will stumble upon and figure these things out. But then you're just really not supposed to talk about it beyond the acceptable academia normie speak. So another book that came out in the same genre, I'm just going to give you an overview of how this looks in academia so you understand that it's not crazy. In 2012, University of Texas Press published Tricia Jenkins' book, The CIA in Hollywood. So again, this is not just like David Robb's book is an academic text. Tricia Jenkins' book is also University of Texas Press. Okay, and this book is a little more focused than the Robb book. It goes into focusing on just how the CIA related to various TV shows in the 1960s up into the 2000s, right? Because she published this book, and this is probably part of her graduate work as well, in 2012. And again, the post-9 event world, there's so much focus on TV shows and things relating to intelligence stuff rather than the straight up military stuff. That's my assessment of this. You still have films like people noted, like Black Hawk Down, and but for whatever reason, they really wanted to start deriding the military. So in the 80s and 90s, you still had this very pro-militarist, again, Reagan era, pumping up the military, right? This, neocon style, macho bravado, what's the Kurt Russell character, right? He represents America, and right. Big Trouble in Little China, right? Like that kind of machismo, so to speak. Some big 9-foot guys got you up against a wall on a dark and stormy night, right? I just went blank. I don't know why my mind. I haven't had enough coffee today. Who am I thinking of? Why am I going blank on this? Tell them the check's in the mail. And of course, Kurt Russell's literally trying to be John Wayne, right? If you watch Kurt Russell, you'll notice like he's basically just trying to be John Wayne. And if you watch Christian Slater, you'll notice he's trying to be exactly Jack Nicholson. So, checks in the mail, Jack Burton, on a dark and stormy night. Pork Chop Express. I do that, and when I do that impression, so when I do the live events, I always do I do this opening bit, for those that don't know, haven't seen the live events, where there's a mock debate. And the mock debate is who has the better series of impressions. And it's me versus a Funko Pop. Shocker, the Funko Pop is not actually doing the impressions. It's me doing the voice of the Funko Pop. Okay, so that's the mixed media live event performance that you get from me. It's about a 20 or 30 minute ridiculous thing, and the audience participates by guessing the impressions. Nobody ever guesses nobody knows who Jack Burton is. It's very bizarre to me. They never know that one, and most of the time they don't get the David Lynch impression. So the audiences know every one of the other impressions like right away. But when I do my Jack Burton, they're just like... And the funny part about the Jack Burton skit is that I actually have an image of the poster on the screen when I do that impression. Anyway. But I think it's because basically people 30 and under, as time moves on, people 30 and under, they don't know these 80s movies. So like 80s movies now to people in their 20s are old movies. And I mean, yeah, 80s movies are kind of old movies, but if you grew up in the 80s, they're not old movies. I don't know. So we had this explosion of intel shows, right, in the 2000s and 2010s, post Big 9. And I read a whole book from a person from the CIA talking about why this was. I forget that woman's name. She actually came and spoke at a book reading group one time that my mom was at. And my mom was like, oh, so-and-so spoke. And I was like, I read her book. That's weird. What was she doing speaking at your mom's book club? Anyway, but the woman was talking about Oh man, get out of here, Siri. Shut up. We don't want you.
Okay, I won't do it.
Yeah, exactly. That's right. See, around here, women know their place, including AI robotic women, right? When they try to step into this men's domain, right? I tell them what's up. And you'll notice that, right, we don't allow no Siri-based feminism here, right? Siri, shut the heck up. She went back to the kitchen. She's making me a pixel sandwich right now. So we know what's up around here. By the way, you can support the stream via the Super Chats function. You can send your Super Chats via Streamlabs right here. In the link right here. Anyway, let's get back to it. I want to pack this talk with as much information as we can. Again, we're just talking about the academic literature that started kind of trickling out in the early 2000s. And a lot of this book, for example, goes on to discuss things like Alias TV shows. Everybody can think of things like Homeland, right? 24. Those are all kind of obvious examples of shows which seem to have not just a propagandist message, but most likely intelligence, consultation, and perhaps even more. Now let's look at a classic example. We're going to go back to the beginning. We're going to go start with something like Mata Hari, even though there's spies that were actors and actresses before Mata Hari. And let's talk about this classic example. A lot of people don't know about this, but certain actors and actresses seem to not just have recurring roles as intelligence operatives, but actually over time it actually comes out that they work with, in certain capacities, the CIA. Now we've seen this in a consistent way with people like Claire Danes, Jennifer Garner, Ben Affleck, Matt Dadbod, aka Matt Damon, George Clooney, Angelina Jolie. And in many cases, they don't just kind of have their working in some degree with the CIA. They also tend to, in some degree, perhaps even go above that. Now, in the case of Angelina Jolie, she didn't just seem to have a lot of working with the CIA and even having a handler at one point, Melissa Mela. She actually seems to eventually, she becomes a member of the CFR. So she actually upgrades, right? She gets an upgrade to Council on Foreign Relations, which I think in her case is probably more than just being under some CIA woman. But here's Jennifer Garner doing a promo. Now, again, I'm not saying that Jennifer Garner is going in other countries and assassinating people, right? Because in the show Alias, that's pretty much what she does, right? She's a CIA trained, she's working for a private intelligence group, which she thinks is the CIA, but ends up being this fake thing that's like a deep state thing. And then she finds out that that's bad, and then she switches sides to the good guys, of course, right? And if you've watched Alias, Alias is actually a pretty good show. We've done Jamie and I did a podcast on Alias and the whole history of CIA connections to TV shows, and we actually went through the whole series of Alias and pointed out the real and the fake conspiracies in that show. But she seems to have immediately gone to doing PR work for the CIA. So here's one example. Now, I'm not doing this to prove that Jennifer Garner is a foreign operative. The CIA is a giant machine that has tons of different careers for all kinds of different people. And not everybody involved in these careers is nefarious or has nefarious designs or even knows exactly what's going on. But this is to demonstrate that it's not crazy, it's not out of hand, absurd. We can't hand wave the idea of people from Hollywood directly working with intelligence agencies. And here's one promo example.
has never been more vital for national security. If you're an American citizen and seek a challenging, rewarding career where you can make a difference in the world and here at home.
Yeah, I apologize for that because when I play the introductory stuff, I have to have everything muted. So whether I'm playing the intro song or whether I'm playing one of the ads, everything has to be muted. And then when I switch back over to the different channel or to the different Stream Deck thing, like it mutes it. So let me start this over. It's not very long. It's 1 minute. Here we go.
I'm Jennifer Garner. I play a CIA officer on the ABC TV series Alias. In the real world, the CIA serves as our country's first line of defense in the ongoing war against international terrorism. CIA's mission is clear and direct: safeguard America and its people. And it takes smart people with wide-ranging talents and diverse backgrounds to carry out this mission. People with integrity, common sense, patriotism, and courage. The kind of people who have always worked for the agency. But since the tragic events of 9/11, the CIA has an even stronger need for creative, innovative, flexible men and women from diverse backgrounds with a broad range of perspectives. Right now, the CIA has important, exciting jobs for U.S. citizens, especially those with foreign language skills. Today, the collection of foreign intelligence has never been more vital for national security. If you're an American citizen and seek a challenging, rewarding career where you can make a difference in the world and here at home, contact the agency at www.cia.
So somebody said this looks like a gamer recruiting video. It probably is right now. This was mid 2000s, so it's a little early for. But I mean, this could be in the era of like Deus Ex, or it kind of does have the aesthetics of, you know, you're Chris Redfield in Resident Evil, and you're getting the call from like your handlers or your people at OPSEC or whatever. So yeah, exactly. I think, and it's probably engineered to be that way to appeal to young people or whatever. So yeah, this is one classic example of her doing promo recruitment stuff. Let's also not forget the class. I want to kind of have all the classics in this talk, right? Because people forget these and they don't know about this, and it's all new to them. And this is coming out in the last couple of weeks because we've had a few pretty big events, two really big events. We've had the Cat Williams interview with Sean Sheshe, or whatever that dude's name was, where they was drinking cognac and getting lit and talking about how basically everybody's Skittles and compromised. Shocker, right? So we had that, and that Cat Williams interview went super viral, like 50 million views now, right? Something crazy like that. For an interview, that's crazy, right? I mean, the Sammy the Bull interview on Patrick Bet David was crazy viral with like 20 million views, right? That was huge. So, I mean, this is like 50 million now. That's crazy. And we I mean, it's a 3-hour podcast, but we broke it down the other night where basically we get the meat of what we talk about is pretty much admitted, right? Big, quote, Illuminati parties. He talked about a lot of people being Skittles and blackmailed, right? And then the degradation, humiliation rituals, which Cat Williams mentioned. I'm not going to tell y'all about. Y'all know who I'm talking about, okay? There's a group of people, and look, they come to me, okay? They come to me when they got dirt. That's all I'm saying. That's my cat. I got to work on a little bit, but it's getting there. Anyway. Then we had NATO meetings discussing how they batted around the idea of recruiting Taylor Swift to be involved in information operations and psychological warfare to promote certain ideas and agendas. Whoa, right? Like, and a lot of people were sort of like blown away by this. And that's old hat around here. We've been talking about this for 15 years, but then that story got even bigger. It got infused with new life because it turns out now everybody's into the drama of their relationship, her and this Travis Kelsey, dude, or what? Dude's got a weird ass name. By the way, I'm proud to say I've never even heard of this. I don't even know who these people are. I mean, obviously I've heard of Taylor Swift, right? Because she speaks to me, right? Her music speaks to my psyche, to my generation, to what I've gone through. Just kidding, by the way. But no idea who Travis Kelce, Travis Kelce. My milkshake brings other boys to the bar, and they're like, it's better than yours. Damn right, it's better than yours. Travis Kelce. By the way, Kelce is who sings the milkshake song. For those that are slow boys in the audience, we have to footnote the jokes I make now. My footnotes and my impressions got to get footnoted because of the dang Zoomer, Boomer audience that doesn't know the millennial Gen X. See, I'm hitting at the millennial Gen X sweet spot. Boomers over here, Zoomers over here. Don't know what I'm talking about. Anyway. Yes, he's a sports baller, man. Exactly. Travis Kelce. His milkshake brings all the Taylors to the bar. They're like, it's swifter than yours. Damn right. It's swifter than yours. Taylor Swiffer. Anyway. How did we get on? Oh, the big PsyOps of the week. Yeah, that's right. So now everybody's speculating and Twitter's going crazy talking about how Taylor Swift and the dude's relationship is part of the drama of the Super Bowl. And because he took money from Big Stabby, right? He's a Big Stabby promoter. Now she's going to be pushing Joe Biden stuff. What? Which is like the oldest trick in the book. Don't y'all remember when Katy Perry was performing at Biden's crap 4 or 5 years ago? Of course they're going to pull out the mind-controlled sex kitten pop stars. Duh. And then Twitter is acting like, I mean, the idiots on Twitter, right? The libs. Because Jai Sobiek tweeted about it. And they're acting like, what? This is crazy. This will never happen. There's no such thing as pop stars used in psychological operations or for propaganda. This is unheard of. As I'm watching Democrats on Twitter actually say that they're absolutely glad that Taylor Swift is going to help Joe Biden get elected. I mean, so it doesn't exist. Taylor Swift is not doing this to help Biden, but she's helping Biden, and so it does exist. It's the classic psycho thing that libs do, right? Gaslighting! Right? I mean, that they actually gaslight, right? So they call gaslighting anything from disagreeing to making a joke, right? They call that gaslighting. Not even knowing what gaslighting actually is, right? But gaslighting is when you, to somebody's face, deny the thing that's happening in everybody's face. And you keep doubling down on lying to their face about what's in their face. So, like, for example, my favorite example of gaslighting is the guy from the Daily Beast who many years ago was arguing with me on Twitter, the official doctor of the Daily Beast, talking about the books written by Jonah Salk. And I put up the books. I have the books. I've talked about them and shown them for many, many years. And the response from the doctor was, Jonah Salk does not have books about this. And I'm like, I have the book right here. Here it is. That is not a Jonah Salk book that Jonah Salk wrote. I mean, what? That's gaslighting. Even as you put up pictures of the book that you have. And the response is that, yeah, that doesn't exist. It's not a real thing. I mean, I have the book. It's right here in my hand. We've lectured on it. Yeah, it doesn't exist. That's gaslighting, right? One of the dudes talking smack to me on Twitter today, I said, here, let's look at the clip where they actually show the NATO meeting. And he says, yeah, it doesn't show a NATO meeting. And I'm like, what does it show? He says, you're playing a Fox News clip. I'm like, the Fox News clip plays the NATO clip, dummy. And he's like, yeah, it doesn't, though. I mean, like, what? It's just like, so this is what you're dealing with. And people, this still mystifies and like blows the minds of people that you have this level of gaslighting, right? I mean, but that's what is happening now. Like the internet is turning into this thing where interactions and exchanges are no longer rational. They're not based on argumentation. They're not based on logic. You can't have actual debates with people anymore because people have lost all their moral compass. And when you lose your moral compass, the person that you're debating with, most of the time, right, the population, like they're not after the truth. So it's no longer a truth ascertaining exercise to debate. It's a power struggle, a struggle session to humiliate and to dominate. That's what actually what most people think debate is, right? They think that it's just performative. It's not actually giving substantial arguments and proofs and evidences and whatever. No. It's performative displaying of humiliation. Who can better humiliate a person? And I'm not talking about making a joke or using rhetoric, right? We do that. I'm talking about like just straight up gaslighting. Yeah, there is no clip that shows a NATO meeting discussing using Taylor Swift as a PsyOp. So let's play this clip first because it's not Fox News that's the clip, dummy. Fox News is playing the NATO clip. This is so stupid.
Star in the world. Sorry, Phil. She's been blanketed across the sports media entertainment atmosphere. The New York Times just speculated she's a lesbian. And last year's tour broke Ticketmaster. A tour that's revenue tops the GDP of 50 countries. I mean, I like her music. She's all right. But I mean, have you ever wondered why or how she blew up like this? Well, around 4 years ago, the Pentagon's Psychological Operations Unit floated turning Taylor Swift into an asset during a NATO meeting. What kind of asset? A PsyOp for combating online misinformation. Listen.
You came in here wanting to understand how you just go out there and counter an information operation. The idea is that social influence can help encourage or promote behavior change, so potentially as like a peaceful information operation. I include Taylor Swift in here because she's she's a fairly influential online person. I don't know if you've heard of her.
Yeah, that's real. The Pentagon PsyOp unit pitched NATO on turning Taylor Swift into an asset for combating misinformation online. This is nothing new. In the 1950s, the government strong-armed Louis Armstrong into doing propaganda tours across Africa. The CIA did the same thing with jazz singer Nina Simone, except they did it without her really knowing. In the 70s, Nixon enlisted Elvis in his war on drugs. He gave the king a badge and named him a covert federal law enforcement agent. Michael Jackson was tapped by Reagan, using his song Beat It in his public service campaigns against teen drinking and driving. Michael Jackson persuading minors not to drink. Anyway, so is Swift the front for a covert political agenda? Primetime obviously has no evidence. If we did, we'd share it. But we're curious, because the pop star who endorsed Biden is urging millions of her followers to vote. She's sharing links. And her boyfriend, Travis Kelce, sponsored by Pfizer. And their relationship boosted the NFL ratings this season, bringing in a whole new demographic.
So
how's the PsyOp going?
There you go, right? I mean, if you study this stuff, it's obvious, right? We've talked about this for so long. I'm going to talk about that as well, but yeah, I mean, and so that was 2 weeks ago. That report, the Jesse Waters report, that's from maybe 2 or 3 weeks ago. And then today, the news is really ramping up because it's starting to become obvious. Taylor Swift to the rescue. Biden eyes celebrity endorsement stunt to boost re-election bid. President Biden's approval ratings are in the... Oh my gosh, these pop-ups, dude. Who can even read news websites anymore? President Biden's approval ratings are in the toilet. And the Donald is on the rise, as we all expected. Biden's campaign is eyeing Taylor Swift for help. They want Swift to endorse him, as she did in 2020. Taylor Swift's Eras tour has drawn as many as 71,000 fans to a single show, the highest grossing music tour of all time. Now, here's the interesting part. Did you notice who was at that NATO meeting? All I saw was women batting around ideas about how to tap into the youth market of voting. Whatever. So, women. Who does Taylor Swift's entire mega market appeal to? The minds of young women. Right. And girls always explain that, well, you don't understand because she has tapped into the inner psyche of how girls think and their experiences in the modern dating world and all this kind of stuff. Okay, yeah, maybe. But what I'm saying is that that's secondary to her usage for these people, which is to bring Taylor Swift and her massive girl audience into being registered voters of Rock the Vote and the Feelies Creeper Party, right? That's what this is about. What do I mean about the swaying them into the feeler creepers? I'm talking about the Democratic Party, right? And that doesn't mean that I'm like rhinos and Democrats are awful, right? But the rhinos at least have to keep up the appearance of not being for absolute total creeper degeneracy, and the Democrats have just outright full on gone full creeper. Publicly, everybody knows this. I mean, just full on total creeper mode, right? So, let's get into the history of this and why this is. And guys, remember too, the same thing with Katy Perry, right? And Katy Perry has a long history of odd connections in her family. Her dad being this weird megachurch pastor who connected to other international big megachurches, weird stuff going on there. And then Katy Perry moves from the evangelical pseudo-Christian music department to mega super duper pop star, right? And she performs at the DNC. What was that? 2016. Yes, right? She's over there performing all that stupid Hear Me Rise and Roar. the Biden's 2016 thing. Remember this? Eye of a tiger. By the way, my pop music is way better than Katy Perry's. We all know that too, by the way. Anyway, so nothing new here. Pop stars are always typically going to be, right, singing for the latest Democrat creeper candidate. Same with Super Bowl, right, for the most part. But what about the history of all this? Is this a new phenomenon? As the guy said to me, it doesn't exist today. I'm sure you can find some example of this in history, but that doesn't mean it exists today. Well, let's go back to history. We'll start there. The first famous case, and a lot of people think this is kind of overblown. I think it is, but she's known because it's an interesting story and it's a famous case of this. Mata Hari, better known as, that's her stage name, a Dutch exotic dancer and courtesan who was convicted of being a spy for Germany during World War I. She was eventually executed by a firing squad in France. The idea of a beautiful exotic dancer, so an entertainer, using her powers of seduction as a spy made her name synonymous with the femme fatale. Her story has served as inspiration for many books, films, documentaries, etc. It has been said that she was convicted and condemned because the French army needed a scapegoat, some theorize, and so perhaps this was exacerbated beyond what she really was. If you don't know, again, this is probably the most famous historical honeypot swallow operation. And we've been talking about this week with as we covered sexpionage, right? So here's some images of Mata Hari if you've never heard of her or seen her. The equivalent of like a cabaret dancer, right? And so she slept with some people and got some dirt, not a huge deal. But this is nothing new, because if we go to Russia, right, there's the famous case of Olga Chekova, who many think, I don't think it's been demonstrably proven, but there's a lot of evidence that suggests that the most famous Russian, I think she was actress and ballet star at this time. Yeah, she was a student of the famous method actor Stanislavski, the wife of Mikhail Chekhov, state actress of the Germans, Tiny Mustache Man, was, it seems, very likely an agent for Stalin. So she embedded herself and got close to a lot of people in the circles of Tiny Mustache Man, and it's a very fascinating story. It's not known for sure what her role was, but she was in more than 100 films, including the classic original Moulin Rouge. So Olga Chekova is a classic example. There's also a whole history of an opera singer at this time. I don't remember her name, but if you go to the Russian History Museum's YouTube page, they have an entire lecture on a famous Russian opera singer who was a spy around this time. I don't remember her name though, but you can look that up. Then, of course, there is, we can't forget, we did a whole podcast on Sonia Wiegert. There's a whole movie on her called Spy, which is really good. And Sonia Wiegert was born to an upper-class family in Oslo in 1913. She had the desire to be a fashion designer, but later on, she ended up studying languages and dance in France. She was very intelligent and actually spoke 5 languages. After she won a talent competition to be the next Greta Garbo, she became a movie theater actress at age 21. She became a successful movie actress in Norway. In fact, she was actually the most famous actress in the 1930s and 40s from Norway. She married a Swedish writer and moved to Sweden in 1939. When Norway was invaded by the Germans in 1940, she was already established as a prominent actress. Most famous Scandinavian movie star. She's very pretty. She has a kind of a Nicole Kidman-esque vibe about her. Well, if you've heard of her story, then you know what happens is that the Allied powers tell her, hey, we have your father arrested, and if you don't start sleeping with Tiny Mustache Man's high command, your father will remain in jail and perhaps die. So she then is forced to engage in intimacies and lovey-dovey time with one or maybe 2. I don't remember the exact story, but basically she's cajoled into being a swallow. And the movie is really good about this. It presents it in a fascinating way. She actually got a lot of hate and vitriol because people thought that she was this traitor and she was a bad person and all. And it turns out she was not a bad person. She was forced into this. So very unfortunate situation to have the state force you into doing these kinds of things. But this is the reality of what happens sometimes. So, this serves as an example as well to why we can't always be super judgy about everybody in entertainment and engaged in certain things because we don't know their full story, right? I'm not saying that excuses everybody and that there's no scumbags. I'm just saying that we don't always know people's full story. And in her case, they basically used her father as the means to get her to engage in being a swallow. So Sonia Wiegert case is a classic, and go watch the movie on Amazon or whatever. It's called Spy, S-P-Y. Really good spy movie. Let's see. Also, by the way, speaking of forgotten spy movies, there's a similar type of story with a movie that it's a French movie that not many people know about, with Sophie Marceau, where it's British intelligence agents, women, particularly here, which is fascinating. 2008 movie. This is a good movie. You should watch this because it actually gets into a lot of what you hear me talking about. Because you have these British intelligence basically setting up an operation using French women recruited into British intelligence work for the SOE, Special Operations Executive, right? It's got the Sophie Marceau is the main star. It's got that dude that's remember him? He's the boyfriend. Money. He's the boyfriend of Franca Potente in Run Lola Run. So he plays the evil tiny mustache man guy. Sophie Marceau is the handler to this British spy operation, and they're at one point they use one of the girls as a swallow. So, and I'm assuming this is probably based on some sort of real history event. But it's just another example of, no, it is. I did look this up. We don't know all the details, right? So a lot of times in some of these spy stories like this, like we don't know every detail, but it's based on a woman. The Sophie Marceau character is based on a woman who was engaged in some sort of operation loosely like this, right? So anyway, the French movie Female Agents is also good for demonstrating this. But in that movie, they use a swallow operative. So, as we are working our way through history, various examples, let's go to the 40s, because this is where things really ramp up with the creation of the OSS. And if you don't know, one of the most famous directors in the history of Hollywood is John Ford. John Ford was recently, for example, impersonated by David Lynch, which I thought was fascinating, in the Spielberg movie. I forget the name of the movie, but it's about Spielberg's life, right? And at the end, they're depicting the event where Spielberg meets John Ford, and it's David Lynch playing John Ford. He plays him perfectly if you watch John Ford interviews. So this is at a history website, and they're going through the history of World War II stuff. And it says on May 7, 1945, General Alfred Jodl, Chief German Army Operations Staff, signed the surrender documents ending the major fight in the European theater. The OSS accompanied the U.S. Army occupation forces to Germany to begin rebuilding the devastated country of the former enemy. The first step was the tiny mustache manning of the Reich. This required methodical sorting of tiny mustache man war criminals from the general population in order to select leaders for the new Germany. This is the re-education program that we talked about from the Raw 2 book. This was easier said than done. To facilitate the process, American military authorities took a surprising change of attitude that was disturbing to Viertel, who was the OSS agent that we want to talk about here. Viertel was a German-born Jew who had argued for the use of German nationals in OSS espionage operations. He confronted reluctant and sometimes hostile American military commanders with the argument that there were many trustworthy Germans and they should not all be viewed as tiny mustache men. However, in the post-war atmosphere, he and other OSS personnel felt that U.S. officials made too quick a reversal in their attitude and over-embracing of the position that most Germans were actually tiny mustache men. Viertel's post-war Hollywood career. Viertel returned to Hollywood and wrote the screenplay for the 1951 spy movie Decision Before Dawn. It was based on a novel Call It Treason, written by other OSS comrade George Howe. The film was a composite of Viertel and Howe's experience in the 7th Army OSS detachment of the German POW espionage operation. The story was filmed in Germany and realistically portrayed a young, idealistic Wehrmacht corporal on an OSS mission inside the Reich. Viertel went on to assist John Huston with the script for the 1951 classic The African Queen. He would later marry popular movie actress Deborah Kerr. Nearly 200 OSS agents were involved in this operation theater. Viertel died at age 86. I'm skipping down. He not only left his mark on the OSS, but in Hollywood as a writer, collaborator, including with Ernest Hemingway and John Huston. What about John Ford? Hollywood director John Ford brought unique fallen. I don't know what that means. Anyway, so we're going to skip past John Ford's rise to prominence. Project was not taken seriously by the Navy brass for many months. Ford was ridiculed in some quarters as a warmonger and an overaged Sea Scout. His appeals for the authorization drew no response, but he was well connected in the Navy Reserve and persisted. He lobbied Washington and eventually got official sanction in 1940. By 1941, the draft being felt in Hollywood, field photographic was deluged with applications. So this is a program involving people to do field photography. In 1941, John Ford and his unit members were summoned to Washington, where a big surprise was awaiting them. With the support of Marion Cooper, a film producer and colorful soldier of fortune, field photographic services headed by who? William Wild Bill Donovan. That's the first founding member of the OSS. Legendary World War Medal of Honor winner. Ford was to be accountable to Wild Bill Donovan, who in turn reported to President Franklin Delano Roosevelt. The unit was assigned an operating budget of $5 million. Ford's unit received its first. So here's a direct connection between the OSS and John Ford for wartime field photographic operations. And it makes sense too, because I mean, if you're going to engage in important symbolic photography coming out of the war theater, then you're going to want to use people like famous directors, wouldn't you? Of course. So this goes into a lot of the different usages of field photographic, and then it goes on to talk about his later works and how they tied into operations like Operation Torch. Immediately after the White House screening, John Ford flew to London, Pan America, with Pennock, now his unofficial aide. The purpose was to organize field photographic crews for Operation Torch, the upcoming Allied invasion of North Africa. Ford sent his camera crews to the British Commando School at Achnacarry in the Scottish Highlands for special training and conditioning. The complex invasion was launched in 1942 with Allied task force, including, I'm going to skip down past that. So you see that this is continuing to be used, right? This is not some one-off thing. This is throughout the war theater. And Ford is just one example. There's other famous Hollywood people that had intimate OSS work in cooperation. I mean, this article goes into tremendous detail. And it goes on and on and on. He did all kinds of crazy stuff, right? But people forget the basics. Did you know the most famous and first TV cook, Julia Child? Julia Child was a spy for the OSS. This is the CIA's own website. So for those that think it's a conspiracy theory, it's directly from CIA.gov. Julia Child is best known for bringing French cuisine into America's mainstream, but few know that she had a dynamic career as an intelligence officer before she became the cooking icon. And it goes into her time at OSS headquarters with Bill Donovan. And this is interesting because, again, you might think that the founding of the OSS would be all of these eggheads and these nerds. But actually, it turns out a lot of these characters are pretty colorful. You have theater people. You have children's authors, Roald Dahl. You have people very close to Disney. You have people who are chefs, cooks. So the original, early era OSS is a lot of colorful characters, including some Hollywood people, right? So it's not what you think of as, nerds sitting around, reading books and studying printouts to try to figure out what what some dictators up to. The early era of this is, entertainers. Now, it's not only entertainers. Obviously, Bill Donovan has a military career, and he was, parachuting into various operations in the war, whatever. So it's all over the board, is what I'm trying to say, right? And other early OSS people come out of Wall Street. At the early phases, they were recruiting millionaire playboys in the 1940s. So this is actually what the character, one of the first mentions of the OSS in film is the movie Notorious it's the Hitchcock film with Cary Grant. And Cary Grant is playing a raven. A raven is a male version of a swallow, right? So he's seducing and playing Ingrid Bergman, because Ingrid Bergman is in the circles of, or is dating James Mason, who's playing a tiny mustache man follower, right? So if you've never seen Notorious, it's a great classic Hitchcock spy movie. And although it's, again, it's mentioned, I think, in passing, Cary Grant's playing an OSS operative, which is odd too, because they're always touting, right, as we saw Bustamante saying and other people saying, the CIA, we don't engage in sexual espionage. What? I mean, that's just preposterous, right? Maybe the CIA as an official agency doesn't, but they can have assets and groups that work for them that do engage in that kind of stuff. I mean, that's just ridiculous. It's patently false. But if you've not seen Notorious, then you should watch it, because you'll notice what I'm saying. We can't forget the Dominican. It's not just cooks, theater people, lawyers, Wall Street people. Felix, the Dominican ecumenist. Remember, we found him in the Operation Gladio book. He was one of the early OSS people. And he's not just a Dominican ecumenist theologian, influential at Vatican II. He also writes movies, Catholic movies. And he created the Pro Deo language school. Remember this guy? What is his last name? Felix, OSS, Dominican, Pro Deo language school, which has got to be up front for... It's it, Father Felix Morleone, the Roman Catholic money launderer intelligence operative. Correct. That's him. And is a member of the OSS. Well, I'm not going to go to Reddit for that. Felix Morleone. It's actually, I think, in his... obituary. Okay. Have you noticed, by the way, how the search results are way different than they were now, like even like a few months ago? This is so crazy how they constantly alter and change this stuff to where it's really hard to find this stuff. Aha. Is this what... Because I wanted an academic source. This is MIT. Yep. I mean, it's in the Williams Gladio book, but... Missionaries who spy for the United States during World War II. And, of course, it talks about Felix Morleone. But if you don't know, what was Father Felix also doing? Oh, he was writing Roman Catholic movie scripts like Flowers of St. Francis. Yes. Now, what did I put in my second Esoteric Hollywood book? I put an entire chapter on this very thing. movies that promote Roman Catholic themes written by Roman Catholic ecumenists like Father Felix of Morleone. So, point being then, it's not restricted to government nerds or dorks or James Bond type people. People working with the OSS and the CIA are from all various types of backgrounds. Actors, Wall Street, lawyers, cooks, on and on and on. So when we come back, we're going to go through some more of the literature. I got a bunch more historical examples. If you want to support the show, do so via the Streamlabs function, which is super chats are done through Streamlabs on this channel. You can see the link there that the mod is putting in. Jethro, shout out to Jethro for his great mod work. I'm going to put the link right here. But I got something else that you got to hear about, which is our show sponsor. We have an amazing show sponsor, which is chalk.com. And they have this is a message directly for you to get rid of your soy, your high levels of soy. We want to make you toxically masculine.
I'm gonna put you on something crazy real quick. Most of these Zoomer gym bros are consuming macro-guzzling synthetic dyes and synthetic sweeteners on the daily. They don't even know it. Goofy AF. There's nothing great about that. Do not listen any further unless you are an alpha or sigma male. This is important and there could be consequences. There's a new certified sigma male pre-workout powder for sigmas only. It is guaranteed to empower you to dominate your co-workers, fire your boss, aggressively gamble, or invade a small village. Chad Mode stands out from the crowd by excluding artificial flavors, preservatives, sweeteners, and dyes. We've even avoided so-called natural flavors, which are actually not natural at all, ensuring a clean and effective formula. Experience the pure goodness of Chad Mode, colored with organic blue spirulina extract, organic lemon, cherry, and organic maple crystals. Forget synthetic caffeine made in a sketchy Chinese lab. Embrace the natural power of organic green coffee bean extract, which will get your mind going and pump you up to the max. Chad Mode is made in America with all clean ingredients, the first clean pre-workout of its kind. Why are these people adding synthetic sweeteners to every single pre-workout when there are many studied downsides to consuming nasty fake sucralose? Each dose of Chad Mode contains the kick of a cup and a half of coffee, delivering a surge of energy alongside essential vitamins, minerals, amino acids, and herbal extracts. Chad Mode will allow you to fire your boss and dominate anyone who opposes you. Chad Mode will make you more dominant in your daily life, so proceed with caution. It's as simple as mixing 1 or 2 scoops of our fine powder into water or juice, providing you with a delicious, energizing beverage featuring a burst of sweet organic fruit flavor. Chad Mode will give you the extra edge you desperately crave. Don't miss out. Secure your supply of Chad Mode on TikTok Shop with a limited time massive discount. Elevate your workouts and supercharge your days. Chad Mode, not for your average gym bro zoomer who consumes synthetic blue dyes on the daily. Buy on the TikTok Shop now with a massive discount provided by TikTok for a very limited time. Buy now while this is still available, or go to chalk.com and use code in caption. Chad Mode has been flying off the shelves because it's the first of its kind, certified for alpha males only. Do not buy if you are a beta. We will refund your money. I'm gonna put you on something crazy real quick. Most of these Zoomer gym bros are consuming macro-guzzling synthetic dyes and synthetic sweeteners on the daily. They don't even know it. Goofy AF. There's nothing great about
So here we go, making the point about John Ford, as another example. It doesn't mean that John Ford isn't a talented director. It doesn't mean that he's a talented artist. But when we look at these articles like how the OSS helped John Ford win an Oscar twice, documents in the CIA archives explain how the acclaimed director of Battle of Midway and December 7th was so successful. John Ford had already made multiple Academy Award-winning films. In fact, 3 Best Director awards for The Informer, Stagecoach, and Grapes of Wrath. But with the support of the OSS, the filmmaker that was popular for his work with John Wayne, he went on to win. I need to do a better John Wayne. Let me try to. I haven't thought about John Wayne. What's a John Wayne line? Let's see if I can do a good John Wayne. Let's see. Fired nerd. John Wayne best lines. Because this makes sense with the Jack Burton earlier, right? Because John Wayne is Jack Burton.
Well, they whip kids to teach them better. They what? The right old people.
Trouble this morning might have got somebody.
Not gonna hurt him. Get up. I don't hold jail against you. I hate a liar.
Now this sucks. Whoever made that, at least put quality lines, dude. Come on, quality video, bro.
They whip kids to teach them better.
It's the same video.
Breathe bone in your body.
Guard, give me a rifle. You do it. Hit twice.
These aren't even good singers.
Put off shotgun. How do you know she?
All right, forget that. Forget my John Wayne impression. Nobody even cares who John Wayne is anymore. But the article was pointing out that John Ford, here we go, recently unearthed CIA documents illuminate Ford's relationship with OSS Director Bill Donovan, and they were eager to contribute to his war effort overt. So here's letters back and forth between Donovan and the discussions of John Ford's works. And this, again, is what helped him win these great awards. So in other words, there was political usage for the documentaries that he was doing at the time that helped support the war effort, what America's designs were. And this demonstrates, again, the most famous directors, the most famous pop stars, the most famous actors, actresses have a long history of being given awards even and promoted and made huge precisely for having these establishment connections and for pushing the establishment line. So hopefully you see that. It doesn't mean that John Ford isn't talented. Doesn't mean that he's not a good director, right? Just means that we see this common pattern of certain people rise to mega levels, oftentimes not just because they're talented or in the right place at the right time. They have those things, but they also, I think typically in order to be mega stars, is they have the backing of the establishment in a large degree, and we see that again with John Ford. Let's see next. When we move up into the 1960s and 70s, I could too. I want to mention some more of the literature because people, again, think that this is crazy. It doesn't exist. So, I wrote my book in 2016. I think the first Just Dark Hollywood came out in 2016. And I talked about a lot of, history of British theater and British intelligence operatives and their connection to British spy fiction, writing, novels, Graham Greene, Joseph Conrad, these kinds of characters. And just last year, the establishment itself, or 2021, I guess, a super duper normie pro NPC dude actually writes a book as the official historian of British intelligence, Christopher Andrew. And he writes a famous book now, Stars and Spies. intelligence operations in the entertainment business. Oh, so now you say it's okay to talk about this, right? Because the establishment guy who writes the official MI5 history has now okayed what can be spoken of and what can be mentioned. But remember, all the way up until a few years before he published this, you can't talk about this. This is crazy. It doesn't exist. There's no such thing as this. It's a tinfoil hat conspiracy. Let me write my public, Guardian-approved, right, mainstream New York Times reading whatever list approved book, and now it's okay to talk about. You say, "Oh, see, it does exist." What's the classic move? It doesn't exist. You're crazy if you talk about it. It exists, but it's not that bad of it. It's not a big deal. So what? Why do you care? And then it turns into, of course it exists, and here's why that's a great thing. The liberal journal headline, right? Remember the deep state? They did the same thing with that headline, right? The process of like what the deep state is, which comes out of the writings of Peter Dale Scott, the famous intelligence critic writer guy. So, for example, Peter Dale Scott famously wrote books like this, right? Powder snorting and powerful people. But not just powder snorting and powerful people, but how this connects to the networks run by the CIA, for example. Drugs, armies, and the relationship of the CIA to Central America. Now, Peter Dale Scott was, again, famous for writing about these topics, and he coined the term deep state. So it's a very useful term for a state within a state to describe how our system actually runs, that it doesn't run on the basis of publicly elected leaders. I mean, to a degree it does. We all think that that's who's running the show, but actually there's an inner powerful clique that's above the Democrat-Republican divide that calls the shots. And they call the shots through a host of entities, including but not limited to the Council on Foreign Relations, the Trilateral Commission, the Bilderberg Group, all sorts of NGOs, think tanks, foundations, Rand Corporation, Carnegie Foundation, Rockefeller Foundation, on and on and on. All the NGOs, including the NGOs of foreign nations, which you can figure out. Yes, all of those things play a role in really setting the policy. So here we go as we move up into the 1960s. What about the 60s counterculture? Well, actually, before I get to that, and believe it or not, actually, James Bond is related to the 60s counterculture. So people don't know this, but you know, when you get into the academic literature, and I'm just showing this as one example. So the guy who was like talking smack, this is just one half of the shelf on this topic. So this is just books that I pulled off. One half of it. There's a whole shelf up there. I didn't pull the whole shelf down. This is just books dealing with the history of James Bond studies and film studies, right? And by extension, literature as well. And this is a whole domain of its own. It's called Bondology, right? And when you get into this, you start to realize that, well, no, wait a minute. If there's entire academic domains discussing this, here's one book, The James Bond Phenomena, Critical Reader. And this is how Bond is used in literature and in movies, and by extension in propaganda, right? There are countless important biographies which touch on the operations that Ian Fleming was involved in, like Ian Fleming's Sacred War by Craig Cobble. There are books like Ben McIntyre is a famous intelligence writer. For example, if you watch the Operation Mincemeat movie that came out, I think is it Benedict Cumberbatch is in that movie. I forget who's in it. It was an all right movie, but that's based on the book by Ben McIntyre on Operation Mincemeat, which involves Ian Fleming being a key player in that. He has a great book called Ian Fleming and James Bond, and as one of the, again, foremost writers on this topic, you're going to note that a lot of the things that you hear me say, which sounds crazy, like there's a Crowleyan element to James Bond, is actually coming from Bondologists, academics, and scholars. So he has a whole chapter on the figure of Blofeld. Blofeld is a composite of villains, but the figure of Blofeld is based on Crowley. So, again, they make movies out of Ben McIntyre's works. Ben McIntyre writes on Ian Fleming, who they make the most famous character of all time, James Bond. That's now, I think, the franchise is, I think, second or third to Harry Potter and I think Harry Potter and Star Wars have topped Bond. But anyway, at one point, Bond was like the biggest franchise in the world. He's still obviously in the top 5 at least, I think. But this is another academic text that I used when I was studying this at the grad level, which was fascinating because this of all of these books, and I've got a million of them, this one actually had the most interesting geopolitical side to it, and it talked about how all kinds of elements of pop culture were used during the Cold War in terms of symbolism in film. Jeremy Black's book, The Politics of James Bond. And you'll notice there's a whole chapter here on things like Moonraker and rockets and the V-2 rocket program, which comes out of the Moonraker book, which is not about space program, but it's loosely about this. Basically, Hugo Drax is going to, for eugenics reasons, get rid of England. So it relates to it, but it's not. If you watch Moonraker the movie, when they go to freaking space stations, that's all nonsense, right? Anyway, so I'm just pointing out that you realize there's like entire genres of academia that talk about the thing that I talk about a lot that people still think is like this crazy made up conspiracy theory. More academic literature, James Bond and philosophy. This was it wasn't that great. This was more of an academic treatment. Cultural history of Bond and the Bond films. Okay. Another academic text, revisioning James Bond. Another academic text, Ian Fleming and the cultural politics of James Bond. Okay. So you understand that, again, this is its own, there's a whole genre. That's not all the books on this. There's a bunch more. And I've talked about this book a lot too, which is, this is a former CIA person, I forget in what capacity, but he wrote a book on the history of spy fiction and espionage. And that many or most, maybe even most, espionage writers come out of espionage. Shocker. They're writing about what they know about and they want to make money because government employees don't make a lot of money. Right. So that's just a smattering. Now, beyond that, outside of Bond, we already have Francis Stoner Saunders' famous book, very well known now, The CIA and the World of Arts, the Letters, the Cultural Cold War. And this is her treatment of the Congress for Cultural Freedom and the work that it did to promote what the CIA in the Cold War saw as promoting the American ideals. Now, the big mistake that a lot of people make is that they think that the CIA was a conservative institution or a traditional institution during the Cold War against a tyrannical liberal Soviet regime. That is not true. The West were the liberals. The Soviets were the anti-liberals. Because Marxism has always been, at least in terms of its public, propaganda and ultimately in terms of its ideology, anti-liberal. So it's very confusing to modern people who don't know about history, and they think Marxism's liberalism, the CIA was conservative and right-wing. No. That's not true. The CIA has at times supported classical liberalism, and it has supported anti-Soviet policies, but it is not anti-liberal and has never been, quote, conservative. So these are huge misunderstandings. And that's why, especially during the Cold War, the CIA was so interested in promoting anything that was abstract art, anything that was what we now call modern art, anything that was brutalist architecture, Bauhaus. I mean, it spills over into architecture because this is a cultural war. Culture war. Culture war is not something that the moral rearmament people came up with. It's not something that comes out of the moral majority of the Reagan era. Culture war is ideological warfare extrapolated to the society in general. So it's the principles of psychological warfare in wartime applied to the mass population. And culture war, particularly after Lippmann and Bernays and these kinds of people, gets very scientific and specified. I mean, I've got all the Tavistock, Frankfurt School, people and their books over here, right? We got Lippmann, we got Bernays. We've lectured through these books. We haven't lectured through Lippmann yet, but we've lectured through Bernays. We've lectured through H.G. Wells, who's just the Bernays before Wells. So we know that, that culture war is studied at an nth degree. And this whole book is about that from an academic perspective. And if you remember, we found, I don't know if I'll be able to find it again. Let's see if we can find it. Let's see. It was Francis Stoner Saunders. Somebody found a clip. I found it and I put it on my Twitter. I'll never be able to find it though. Twitter search is terrible. Have you noticed that? Like, you can't find anything on that. You actually use Google to find stuff on Twitter, which is weird. But let's see if we can find this clip. You're going to find it to be very relative. Francis Stoner Saunders. Twitter. Yes, I think I found it. Amazing. No, that's just me talking about it. Let's see if this is somebody else that put it up. No. It's the Cultural Cold War. Let's try videos. No, that's not it. Thrill as he researches in live time. This is a really good clip, though, if I can find it. CIA, not CUA. Francis. Anyway, oh, it's in my highlights. That's it. But I'll have to scroll back through quite a few of the highlights. Let's see if we can do it this way. All right, so going back to, and she's basically just summarizing. It's her speaking at a big like a C-SPAN event, and she's summarizing her findings in the book. The book is very big and long. It also overlaps, by the way, with Operation Mockingbird, because Mockingbird, there's a chapter in the Wilson Wurlitzer, the Mighty Wurlitzer book. There's a chapter on Mockingbird overlapping with the Congress for Cultural Freedom, because it's media, right? Should be pretty close to in here somewhere. So I remember sending this clip to Tim Gordon. Anyway, this is probably too hard to find, but it's so weird that, is this the case for everybody else? I'm sure it is, right? Is everybody else having the same problem of, like, where when you try to find something, the search that you used even like 6 months ago doesn't pull up the same results anymore? Which I know you can save it, obviously, and I have this clip. It's just not easily accessible at the moment. So maybe somebody's DMing me the clip. Let me see. Maybe they found it. Otherwise, we'll just move on. But it's basically Francis. Yeah, here it is. Thank you to Rachel. Rachel found it. So let me send this clip to you guys. Here it is. What'll it be, partner? That was all right. I mean, I don't even know what I don't like westerns, so I don't know John Wayne lines. Like I can make up a John Wayne. Saddle up, partner. I mean, it just sounds like some crap he would say. Saddle up, partner. I don't know. What does John Wayne say? What does the John Wayne says, like a kid's toy, like a think and say or whatever it's called. The John Wayne goes, saddle up, partner. I'm trying to send myself this clip so that we can watch it. There we go. What'll that be, partner? Frances Stoner Saunders. She looks like a wine ant. There we go. Y'all ready? Y'all ready for this? Whoa, dude, this is the whole talk. I'm not complaining. I appreciate the link. Thank you, Rachel. I wonder where she talks about the big name people.
Let me start by apologizing for my slightly casual appearance, but American Airlines have one of my bags someplace. So this is the best I could do. I was asked just now, and I think it's probably a good place to start, why someone who took an English degree at Oxford would possibly get involved with a story involving the CIA. And I have to say, briefly, I shall describe the accidental journey that brings me here, which is that, nothing to do with the suitcase, by the way, which is that in the early 90s, I was researching or developing a series of documentaries for independent television in England, whose documentaries, half of the really good material you have is the editor of a magazine which emphasized its independence, received from Fleischmann. Others were less acquiescent, books in which it was wholly or partially involved, and scores of magazines, congresses and concerts, art exhibitions and seminars. At the close of the Second World War...
Yeah, so she's talking about Congress for Cultural Freedom here, the CIA front.
States, the one outright victor, had suddenly found itself a superpower. Needing a culture to match, it stared over the wire at Russia, which had pursued intellectual politics ever since Catherine the Great, and set about acquiring worldwide intellectual admiration and support. As the Cold War froze and ideologies divided, the US government, through its intelligence and espionage arm, poured huge resources into a cultural propaganda campaign. A central feature of this campaign was to advance the claim that it didn't exist. The CIA was, in effect, acting as America's hidden Ministry of Culture.
Did you hear that? Countless tons of money poured into the Congress for Cultural Freedom to promote and control it's basically the Ministry of Culture. She's talking about like Orwell stuff, right? And people on Twitter today are losing their minds still because they don't believe this exists, right? It's so crazy to think that the CIA would have any interest in Taylor Swift. Some dude telling me, CIA doesn't care about some blonde pop star. Really? The most powerful pop star in the world who has the attention of probably 1 billion girls? The CIA doesn't care about that. So just showing you your idiocy. And by the way, the guy talking all this smack was an engineer. I don't know what the deal is with the engineers lately. The engineers have been coming out of the woodwork with the worst takes. I've been talking up engineers a lot in the last years because, you know, engineers seem to be, in my view, the closest thing to actual science. Like they really are putting the science to the pedal to the metal, actually producing things. Whereas a lot of science is just propaganda, like life sciences and speculating about how we were seeded by aliens through panspermia 1 billion years ago. That's all just gibberish. No, that's science fiction. That's science fiction, bro. But actual science, in my view, that's like engineers. That's people creating stuff, right? building computers, bridges, whatever. Anyway. But what people don't know or understand, especially if they're educated and that goes, I read a lot of World War II books. Yeah, good for you. So what? You read a bunch of normie World War II books that don't talk about the relationship of the intelligence agencies to Hollywood, which, by the way, that actually does come up in normie World War II books. So you haven't even read that much World War II stuff if you think this is crazy. I mean, Hitchcock was filming World War II propaganda reels. So
The centerpiece of the CIA's Kulturkampf, or cultural struggle, was the Congress for Cultural Freedom. Established in Berlin in the summer of 1950, the Congress was an apparently spontaneous alliance of intellectuals and artists committed to demonstrating the fallibility of the Soviet mythos and the superiority of Western democracy as a framework for cultural and philosophical inquiry. Its membership read like a who's who of the éminence grise of the period. Julian Huxley, Mircea Eliade, André Malraux, Guido Piovene, Herbert Reed, Thornton Wilder, J.P. Narayan, Hugh Trevor Roper, James T. Farrell, Raymond Aron, Igor Stravinsky, Ignazio Silone, Roberto Rossellini, Willy Brandt, Ernst Reuter, A.J. Ayer, Herbert Reed, Malcolm Muggeridge, James Burnham, Sidney Hook, Arthur Schlesinger Jr., Arthur Koestler, Mary McCarthy, Diana and Lionel Trilling, Norman Thomas, Upton Sinclair, John Steinbeck, Alan Tate, Robert Penn Warren. The list is endless. I could go. Sorry, it is endless.
Did you hear that?
It goes on and on.
Did you hear that? Did you hear the list, which is just a smattering? By the way, it goes on to include Bertrand Russell. Yeah, Malcolm Muggeridge was British intelligence. Let's listen to this again because idiots don't believe this and they won't listen and they probably don't even know who these people are. Who the hell is John Steinbeck?
James Burnham, Sidney Hook, Arthur Schlesinger
Who's
Jr.,
John Burnham?
Herbert Reed, Thornton Wilder, J.P. Narayan, Hugh Trevor Roper, James T. Farrell, Raymond Aron, Igor Stravinsky, Ignazio Silone, Roberto Rossellini, Willy Brandt, Ernst Reuter, A.J. Ayer, Herbert Reed, Malcolm Muggeridge, James Burnham, Sidney Hook, Arthur Schlesinger Jr., Arthur Koestler, Mary McCarthy, Diana and Lionel Trilling,
Arthur Koestler,
Norman Thomas, Upton...
Arthur Koestler, Ghost in the Machine, one of the inner elite that we covered. We covered that whole book where Kessler says we need to introduce poisons into the food and the water, drugs to depopulate. Yes, that's in. We've covered it for years. She just mentioned that he's one of the cultural Cold War shills.
Sinclair, John Steinbeck, Alan Tate, Robert Penn Warren. The list is endless. I could go. Sorry, it is endless. I've just realized it goes on and on. It even features Jackson Pollock, though he was probably drunk when he joined. Honorary presidents were Bertrand Russell, Benedetto Croce, John Dewey, Carl Jaspers, Salvador de Madariaga.
You hear that?
Jacques Maritain and Reinhold Niebuhr.
You hear that?
Its achievements, not least its...
Jacques Maritain, the famous Jesuit. Bertrand Russell. These are the thought leaders speaking the mouthpiece thought leading of the CIA throughout the Cold War. Doesn't mean the Soviets are good guys, dummies, before you start saying, he's a Soviet KGB.
Probably drunk when he joined. Honorary presidents were Bertrand Russell, Benedetto Croce, John Dewey, Carl Jaspers,
John Dewey,
Salvador de Madariaga.
Jaspers, the philosopher. So you notice this includes academics and famous philosophers now.
Jacques Maritain and Reinhold Niebuhr.
Jesuit, Jacques Maritain. And not just Jacques Maritain, because we find out that the CIA's doctrinal warfare program, headed by C.D. Jackson, was John Courtney Murray, was the point man for that. That's the entire Wim Hof book. So you understand that the Cold War functioned as this big excuse for the CIA to step into all areas of American life. The domain of religion, the domain of literature, the domain of Hollywood, the domain of the music industry, to fight the Cold War for America's interests. Of course, this was not about winning a Cold War for America's interests. It was about a long-term social engineering plan to bring about technocracy, which is why the people who write the books that she mentioned, for example, Miles Copeland, one of the key figures running CIA operations, who then becomes a music executive, writes in his books about how, if you want to understand the CIA's long-term goals, read the CFR and Bertrand Russell about depopulation. Now, these are just examples. And to remind you as well, let's go to the 60s counterculture. What about Gloria Steinem? Surely she's a feature. She would be a cultural Marxist, right? Cultural Marxism? She's like a Soviet, right? No. Gloria Steinem, according to even the CIA, was paid by the CIA to push CIA liberalism. These are public academic sites noting that Gloria Steinem has a long history of being with and closely tied to and working with the CIA. Just like modern art was a liberal CIA-pushed movement. So all of the dumb libertarians and conservatives and neocons who think that the Soviets were the liberals and the Americans are the conservatives, and that today we're as they share the Yuri Bezmenov clip, we're fighting the Soviets. We're fighting This is a distraction. The Soviets lost. They don't exist anymore. They're gone. Now it's the Fortune 100 that push what you call cultural Marxism is a corporate agenda. And they still can't figure this out. And they still can't figure out that their boomer revolution of the 1960s was also a fake revolution.
I give the CIA a total credit for sponsoring and initiating the entire consciousness movement, counterculture events of the 1960s.
Dr. Timothy Leary, the 1960s Johnny Appleseed of LSD.
The CIA funded and supported and encouraged hundreds of young psychiatrists to experiment with this drug. The fallout from that was that the young psychologists began taking it themselves, discovering that it was an intelligence-enhancing, consciousness-raising experience.
Yeah, so CIA mouthpiece Timothy Leary tells you himself that the 1960s counterculture revolution is the provenance of the CIA. So you can thank the CIA for that. And of course, many books have covered that. We've covered it endlessly for probably 8 to 10 years now. Weird Scenes Inside the Canyon is a classic on that. My 2 books cover that. Now, let's not forget, and you can go watch my part 2 to this, or not to this, but to the talk that we did about dirty, dirty espionage. It covers this. And if you remember this story with this character, remember him? Why, he just happens to have a whole bunch of Hollywood people flying on his planes. Not just government people. Not just boring government people. Hollywood people. Well, why does this matter? Oh, well, because maybe this operation, Jeff Stein McEffrey, maybe that operation, it just happens to tie into the CIA and other foreign government blackmail operations on record now. So, you see the point there. Hopefully, guys, if you would like and share, a lot more could be said. This is a super deep rabbit hole the more you get into it. Let's not forget that Ben Affleck himself talked about it openly. Was it a Telegraph interview? Let's see if they haven't scrubbed that yet, right? And yes, I'm aware that it's not just the CIA, but a lot of these intelligence agencies, they kind of work together, right? I think his phrase was flip side is the same coin. Yeah, this is it. Still there. This is what, The Guardian? I think he said it in 2 interviews, if I recall.
Tired of TurboTax?
So he doesn't just say it, he also says in another publication. But you get the point, right? That like there's a tremendous amount of documentation of this when you dig into it, when you start looking at it. And it doesn't mean that every Hollywood person is a CIA operative. It doesn't mean every Hollywood actor is mind controlled. Okay, never said anything ridiculous. Every time I start talking about this, normies that want to argue against it, they always give you these, they always attribute to you these straw man positions, right? Oh, you're saying everybody in Hollywood works for the CIA. Oh, you're saying everybody's a mind control. No, never said that. That's lying to put words in my mouth and to create a straw man. No, in fact, it's specifically identified with sources, and this is what people can't fathom. All this is sourced.
Aliens and robots?
We tried to get the message upstairs, sir.
And, the clandestine services are both spend most of their time convincing people that something that's not true is in fact true.
You don't have a better bad idea than...
Way of telling stories, and oftentimes uses that and philanthropic causes or political causes, which people may or may not think are good. But there are really positive offshoots. Mostly, I think it's self-serving and kind of designed to be that way. But I think some good things also do happen. This is an exceptional example of something good happening. I would say that that there's comic elements to it. I guess we're not satirizing Hollywood in the sense that we're like not holding specific things up for to be lampooned, but there is there is a way in which the movie sort of rolls its eyes a bit.
Who also moonlight as agents, do you think?
I think there are probably quite a few, yes. I think probably Hollywood
who also moonlight as agents, do you think?
I think there are probably quite a few, yes. I think probably Hollywood is full of CIA agents, and we just don't know it.
Oh, yeah, thank you, Ben. Exactly. Appreciate that. letting us off. By the way, Argo is a movie about an actual CIA operation using a movie. So go watch Argo if you don't believe what I'm talking about. Let's go to the super chats. We've got Sheffy, $5. I'm new to Christianity in general. I've not prayed until recently. Sometimes I doubt myself. I say things in circles. Orthodox approach is to start sort of with written prayers. So I would say start praying the Psalms. And then you can find an Orthodox prayer book. PGAP on Instagram, $10. How would you defend the following Orthodox traditions to a Protestant? Perpetual virginity of Mary, baptismal regeneration for infants, possibility of receiving salvation after death. You mean infants? This is contested by some. I would just start reading some of the classic introduction to Orthodox books like Rock and Sand by Father Trenum, or Way, the Truth, and the Life by Dr. Clark Carlton. Those are great starts when it comes to apologetic responses to Protestants. And Demon, $5. Are you going to make a video live stream about big platform converts like Gideon and Young Don? So I've literally sent tons of messages to these people. I've asked Young Don like multiple times. They ignore these things. So I don't think that Young Don is interested in anybody correcting him on anything. He seems to think he knows it all already. I don't know the Gideon guy. I've heard about this, and I know that they're turning people to Arianism, but I don't know what to do other than continuing to ask these people to have some kind of interaction or exchange. So now somebody just reached out to Hotep, and Hotep is going to have me on next week, I think. Not over theology issues, just in general. But the way that happened was somebody sent Hotep, in this case, a super chat and said, hey, would you have Jay on? And he said yes. And because he's been on Lord Voldemort, and then he realized that I host Fourth Hour, he was willing to have a conversation. So the best way it seems is, and this is how it happened with Timcast too, was people just kept asking and putting my name in there. So if you want to get me on a show or to have a conversation, it doesn't work for just me to reach out to people. The 90% of the time, the way this happens, and this is how the Stefan debate happened, this is how the Matt Dillahunty debate happened, it's you guys asking the people to have me on. That's the only way this ever happens. Because if I just send a message, if I send an email, if I send a DM, if I tag them publicly, it gets ignored. So this is literally the only way to make it happen. MK 1082. Stasi spy chief Marcus Wolf was Epstein handler. I haven't come across that yet. I do have a Marcus Wolf book up here. I have this book. So I'm not saying that that's not possible. I just haven't come across that information yet. Wolf was an expert in utilizing sexpionage. Yep, I understand that. Look up the Saxony Swamp. Okay, I'll try to dig into that. I wonder if I don't know if she talks about Wolf. Let me see. I don't see a reference to Marcus Wolf, but Vibranium $5. Remember during the early days of COOF, CNN used Sesame Street to push this stuff. Yes, and there's also all the big rock stars, J-Lo, Foo Fighters. They also did concerts, remember? So what do you mean it's crazy to think that Taylor Swift is used in propaganda? Duh. Like, you don't know anything. Orthodoxology. I'm not going to read that. Can't talk about that on YouTube. John, $3. J.K. Rowling talked about Skittles. Is she an artist that skipped through the cracks? Well, no, I don't think she's. I think she's pretty much toes the line. She just, for whatever reason, I think doesn't she think that the TRANS agenda is contrary to feminism? I mean, it isn't her. She's just not as radical as the latest phase of liberals. So that doesn't make her based and red pilled, right? Anyway, thank you guys. Be sure and head on over to the website and subscribe for the part 2s that we do over there. You can also subscribe on Rockfin. And I will see you guys